Now in its 5th official edition, with another revision on the way, Dungeons & Dragons has been the TTRPG of choice of many people for nearly 50 years. With its origins beginning in 1974, Dungeons & Dragons is the oldest tabletop role-playing game. Although we won't be going back quite that far, we will be comparing 1st edition and some 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons with the current 5th edition to see how these beloved games stack up against each other. You are watching League of Three Tabletop RPG, where we explore D&D and other tabletop role-playing games. If you like tabletop RPGs, grab a snack and a drink, sit back, and check out this video. I bid you greetings, dungeon crawlers. Before we get on with today's video, I would like to thank user Timothy Johnson for bringing to my attention the fact that I mispronounced Don K's name. For whatever reason, in the beginning of the video entitled A Brief History of TSR and D&D, I pronounced his name as Don Kale. I actually did this more than once. To anyone familiar with TSR history, or to those who like to research things on their own, you know this is clearly incorrect. I would like to express my apologies for this error, and once again, give my thanks to Timothy Johnson for bringing this to my attention. So that said, welcome to the first ever Errata section. I have a strong feeling this will be a recurring section to the channel. Anywho, to prevent any further embarrassment to myself, let us move on, shall we? In today's video, we're going to talk about races in D&D. For those of you who started your D&D career with 5th edition, quite a few races have been added to the game since 1st edition AD&D was released in 1977. In 1E, you can play as dwarves, elves, gnomes, half-elves, halflings, half-orcs, and humans. What? Were you expecting more? Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's all we had. And yes, when you compare that to the well over 40 plus races you can play in 5th edition, it's really not a lot. However, 5th edition presents us with many sourcebooks and Unearthed Arcana for new races. Sadly, despite what Unearthed Arcana is to 5th edition, 1st edition's Unearthed Arcana wasn't quite the same. It didn't introduce any new races. I guess Mr. Gygax and company didn't think we needed anything else race-wise? In fact, 1st edition was much more human-centric than 5th edition, and was kind of railroady in the way it did that. Railroady. Is that an actual word? Well, today, yes. In 1st edition, probably not so much. Anyway, while you didn't receive any bonuses for being human, you didn't receive any penalties either. Pity you, however, if you wanted to play a half-orc. You had quite a few penalties to deal with if you did choose that race. Not to mention being shunned by NPCs, and perhaps even your fellow player characters. In 2nd edition AD&D, we have the same standard array of races. Dwarves, elves, gnomes, half-elves, halflings, and humans. Wait, that's only 6. Did I forget something? What happened to half-orcs? Right, okay. As part of TSR's plan for updating AD&D, they also removed what they deemed to be controversial topics within the game. To be perfectly honest, I don't remember there being any controversy, but, you know, I'm older than I used to be and my memory isn't perfect. My games as a player or DM, however, never had any such controversy. Apparently, though, it existed. As such, TSR removed half-orcs as a playable race, and devils and demons had new names. There were some other miscellaneous items that were either changed or removed. However, I am not familiar with them, and we are only concerned with much more noticeable upfront changes. Due to this change in TSR's 2nd edition lineup, instead of being a playable race, the half-orc is now listed in the Monstrous Compendium Volume 1, as well as the Monstrous Manual. As you guessed it, a monster. That said, however, our beloved half-orcs did reappear in 2nd edition as a playable race in the Complete Book of Humanoids. Players' options, skills, and powers, and again in the Greyhawk campaign setting, specifically in the Greyhawk Player's Guide. As for 5th edition's plethora of races, I'm sorry to say, in this video I'll only be mentioning the ones from the Player's Handbook. At least for now. I'm sure at some point I will mention them all. At any rate, that knocks them down to 9. And these are the same dwarves, elves, gnomes, half-elves, halflings, half-orcs, and humans found in the 1st edition, plus dragonborn and tieflings. One of the biggest differences between 1st and 2nd editions and 5th edition are the stat changes. For example, in 2nd edition, if you wanted to be a dwarf, you needed a minimum constitution of 11. In 1st edition, your dwarf would need a 12 in constitution. Stat requirements such as this do not exist in 5th edition. Take a look at these tables from 1st and 2nd edition to get an idea of what was required. For more detailed information, each race will have its own video in the future. Some side notes for the curious. 3E and 3.5E brought back the half-orc as a mainstream playable race. Oddly enough, it's also listed in the monster manual as a monster in both 3E and 3.5E as well. In 4th edition D&D, half-orcs were not included in the first Player's Handbook. It was, however, listed in Player's Handbook 2 as a playable race, and also in the Monster Manual 2 as a monster. Prior to this, the half-orc as a playable race could be found in the Forgotten Realms Player's Guide. Tieflings were introduced in 2nd edition AD&D in the Planescape campaign setting and became a mainstream race in 4th edition. Dragonborn were initially introduced in 3rd edition in several sourcebooks, including Races of the Dragon and Player's Handbook 2. Like the Tieflings, however, they too became a mainstream playable race in 4th edition. If you watched this episode to the end, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. If you liked the video, and I really hope you did, please give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. The YouTube algorithm deities love the engagement, and it really helps the channel to grow. Please remember to click subscribe and tick that notification bell so you always know when a new video is dropped. Until next time, may you be met with good fortune and have the best games possible, no matter which version of D&D or any TTRPG you might play.